Have you ever gotten that like weird feeling? Like, you know, when you're talking to someone, they seem really charming, but also like really persuasive, but you just get this feeling that you're being kind of played.
Yeah.
But you can't really put your finger on why.
Right.
Like, there's no actual evidence. It's unsettling.
It can be. I mean, that feeling often comes from dealing with master manipulators. And that's exactly what we're going to deep dive into today.
Okay.
The psychology behind them.
I'm so ready for this.
Specifically, high-functioning sociopaths.
Yeah.
The kind of people who prioritize power above, like, almost everything else.
Yeah, and we should be clear here. We're not talking about, like, everyday persuasion tactics.
No.
This is a whole different ballgame. This is about control. Like, their goal is to have control in every situation.
It is. It's really about understanding this specific mindset.
Right.
How their brains work. Like, what are the techniques that they use to manipulate people? And then, you know, ultimately, what's the danger when this desire for power just goes completely unchecked?
And this isn't all just theoretical either.
Oh, no.
We've done some research for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
We found some writing on this topic.
Yeah.
And we're going to use that to kind of help us understand, like, the crucial differences between the way these people think and the way that, you know, most people think.
Yeah.
So today we're going to figure out what makes a high-functioning sociopath a sociopath, and then how do they do it? Like, how do they manipulate people? How do they get power? And then, most importantly, how do they keep it?
Right.
So, listener, by the end of this deep dive, you're going to have a much better understanding of influence and how control really works on, like, a psychological level.
Exactly.
Okay, let's get started.
Sure.
Where do we even begin with this? Like, what's the big difference between a high-functioning sociopath and, you know, everyone else?
Well, I'd say the biggest difference is emotion. Like, for most people, our emotions, they really guide us, you know? They influence the way we make decisions.
Right.
Our relationships, how we see right and wrong.
Yeah, like that guilty feeling. Yeah.
When you know you messed up.
Exactly.
Or, like, you feel bad for someone when something bad happened to them or they're hurting.
Right.
It's, like, built into us.
It is. But for high-functioning sociopaths, it's different. Like, they don't use emotions as guides. Instead, they use them as tools.
Oh, wow.
To manipulate other people. They understand intellectually how emotions work, and so they just use them to get what they want.
So it's not that they don't have emotions.
No.
It's that they, like, just use them strategically.
Right. It's very cold and calculated.
Interesting.
There's even been some research done that shows that there are differences in the brains of people who exhibit sociopathic traits.
Really?
Specifically the amygdala, which is the part of your brain that helps you process emotion.
So they're literally wired differently.
It seems that way.
Yeah. Wow. So it's not that they, like, can't feel anything.
No. It's more like they choose when and how to show those feelings, and they're not always genuine.
That's kind of scary, isn't it? It is. It is. And this is a big reason why these people are so good at manipulation.
Yeah.
It makes them really hard to spot. You just don't see it coming.
Right.
One of the articles that we read called this emotional detachment. Like, they understand emotions on an intellectual level, but they don't really feel them the way most people do. And this makes them incredibly effective manipulators.
So they can, like, talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's like they can speak the language of emotions, but they don't really know what the words mean.
Right. And it's pretty chilling when you really think about it.
It is.
Think about Johann Liebert, you know, the character from Monster.
Oh, yeah.
He is, like, the perfect example of this. He's a master manipulator. He uses language to completely break people down.
Wow.
He plays on their fears. He preys on their empathy. He's scary good at it.
He is a scary character.
He is. But he's a great illustration of how somebody can manipulate other people by taking advantage of their emotions.
And Johann's not the only one. I mean, we see this all the time. Like, in real life, there are plenty of examples throughout history of people who have, you know, this same kind of emotional detachment.
Right.
And they're able to manipulate people on a massive scale. Like, think about dictators or some CEOs.
Absolutely. These are people who are often driven by power and control.
Exactly.
And they have a very different view of morality than most people.
Oh, okay. Now, this is fascinating to me.
Yeah. It's interesting. For them, morality is like just a suggestion. You know, it's not really real.
It's like an option.
Right. An option that they can choose to ignore whenever they want.
Because their real focus is on getting what they want, no matter the cost.
Right.
And it's the combination of this like different view of morality and the emotional detachment that lets them be such incredible manipulators.
Exactly. It's like they're playing a different game
They really are.
with different rules.
Okay, so we're starting to understand why
Mm-hmm.
they do what they do. But how do they actually do it? What are their moves?
Well, one of the most important techniques is mirroring.
Mirroring.
Yeah, mirroring. It's like they become a reflection of you.
Oh, that makes sense.
They copy your behavior. They pretend to be interested in the things you're interested in.
You think you have so much in common with them.
Exactly.
And you're like instantly best friends. Like you trust them completely.
Exactly.
That is so sneaky.
It is sneaky, but it works incredibly well.
Because our brains are just wired to trust people who are like us.
Right.
It's like we can't help it.
It's an automatic thing, and manipulators know how to take advantage of that.
Like Light Yagami.
Yes. From Death Note.
He was a master at this.
Oh, absolutely.
He was so good at pretending to be this, moral,
Right.
intelligent young man who just wanted justice.
Mm-hmm. And that made it really hard for people to see that he was manipulating everyone around him.
Yeah, because they were so focused on the good guy image.
Exactly.
They didn't notice the strings.
It's like he was playing a role perfectly, and everyone believed it.
That's amazing and kind of terrifying.
It is. It really is. But it's a classic example of how mirroring can be used to deceive people.
Right. So what else? What other techniques do they use?
Well, another one is emotional control.
Okay.
Like staying calm in situations where most people would be freaking out.
Right.
Like imagine someone's yelling at you
Yeah.
or accusing you of something. Most people, they get defensive or angry. But a manipulator,
Yeah.
they'll just stay cool, like completely calm.
And that probably makes them seem even more powerful.
And
they're not losing their cool.
Right.
They have it all under control.
Exactly. They're in control of their emotions. And that makes them seem more powerful.
Because most people, when they're in those situations, they're not thinking clearly.
Right.
But a manipulator, because they're not caught up in the emotion, they can think strategically.
Exactly. They're thinking 10 steps ahead.
We read about a case study where there was this guy who was always taking credit for other people's work.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. And then when people would complain, he'd act all sympathetic.
Right. Like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened.
But then he wouldn't change his behavior at all.
Yeah.
And because he was always so calm and collected, no one could ever really confront him about it.
Yeah. Because they're the ones getting all emotional and worked up.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting there calmly manipulating the situation.
Like, you can't win.
You can't. It's a losing battle.
That's messed up.
It is. It is. But that's the power of emotional control and manipulation.
Okay, so we got mirroring. We got emotional control. What's the third thing?
Deception.
Okay, I feel like this is a big one.
It is a big one.
Because we all know that manipulators lie.
Right.
But it's more than that, isn't it?
It is. They don't just tell straight up lies. Sometimes they do, but not always.
Yeah.
What they do is they control the information.
Oh, I see.
Like, they might tell you half-truths. They'll leave out important details. Or they'll twist the truth just enough to make you see things their way. So they control your perception of reality.
Exactly.
It's like they're building their own narrative.
They are. They're creating their own version of the truth. And they use that to control people.
Like Lelouch from Code Geass.
Oh, perfect example.
He was so good at this.
Oh, yeah. He didn't always lie.
Yeah.
But he was a master at manipulating the truth. He'd use half-truths, strategic omissions, to get people to do what he wanted. And he used that to, influence entire nations.
He was a master strategist.
He was. And his story shows how powerful this technique can be. Like, when you control the information, you control the outcome.
So if you take someone who can mirror your behavior, stay calm under pressure, and twist the truth, you basically have a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, pretty much. They can basically gain power over anyone. And it's scary how easily they can do it.
It really is. But getting power is just the first step. The real challenge is keeping it.
Right. And that's a whole other set of skills.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Once they have power, how do they hold on to it?
Well, one of the most effective ways is through fear.
Fear?
Yeah, fear. It's not pretty, but it works. Like, people are more likely to obey someone they're afraid of.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a basic survival instinct. And rulers throughout history have used fear to maintain their power.
I mean, it makes sense from their perspective, right? If people are afraid of you, they're not going to challenge you.
They're less likely to question you.
Or rebel against you.
Exactly. They'll just do what you say. because they don't want to face the consequences.
It's a harsh reality.
It is. It is. But it's a reality that manipulators understand and exploit very effectively.
So it's not enough to just be powerful. You have to make people afraid of that power.
Right. You have to project an image of strength and ruthlessness so that no one even thinks about challenging you.
And if you think about it, there have been so many leaders throughout history who have used fear to control people.
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic tactic.
So fear is one way. What else? What other strategies do they use to stay in control?
They're obsessed with their public image.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. They're very careful about how they're perceived. They're always trying to control the narrative. And they'll do whatever it takes to protect their reputation.
So like spinning stories.
Yes.
Controlling information.
Absolutely.
Crushing anyone who tries to expose them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they know that their power depends on their image.
It's like, it's not enough to just be powerful. You have to look powerful too.
Yes. You have to project an image of power.
Yeah.
And that image has to be flawless.
And that takes a lot of work.
It does.
Like constant vigilance.
Yeah, it's exhausting. But it's necessary if you want to stay on top.
It's kind of sad, isn't it?
It is. It's a very lonely existence.
Yeah.
Because you can't really trust anyone.
No, you can't, because everyone's a potential threat.
Right. And that's the paradox of power. The more you try to control it,
Yeah.
the more isolated you become.
And the more paranoid.
Exactly.
So I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Oh, yeah.
These techniques that manipulators use to gain and maintain power,
Yeah.
they all kind of tie back to that emotional detachment we talked about.
Right. Because any kind of emotional attachment to a person,
Yeah.
an idea, even a sense of empathy, it can be used against you.
Because it makes you vulnerable.
Exactly. And vulnerability is like kryptonite to a manipulator.
So they have to shut it all down.
They have to cut themselves off from any genuine emotional connection.
That is so bleak.
It is. It's really sad. Because those connections are what make life meaningful.
They are.
But for a manipulator, they're just a liability.
They're just in the way.
Right.
Like, think about Roronoa Zoro.
From One Piece.
Yeah. He's so focused on his goal that he doesn't let anything distract him.
Right. He's not weighed down by emotions.
No.
He just keeps moving forward.
And that's kind of what it takes to stay in power, isn't it?
It is. It's about constantly eliminating distractions.
Yeah.
And making tough choices.
Even if those choices hurt other people.
Yeah. It's a very ruthless mindset.
Yeah.
But it's effective.
It is. But it makes you wonder, like, what's the point?
Right. What's the cost of all this power?
Exactly. Because it can't all be sunshine and roses.
No. No, it's not. There's a dark side to all of this.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What are the risks of living like this?
Well, one of the biggest risks is that it's just not sustainable.
In what way?
Like, it's not a way to live a happy life. You're
Yeah.
constantly on edge, worried about losing your power, and you can't trust anyone.
It's lonely at the top.
It really is. And it's dangerous because when your whole identity is tied up in your power, when you lose that power, you lose yourself.
You're nothing.
Right. And that can be a really devastating experience.
And it can happen to anyone.
It can. No matter how powerful you are, there's always someone waiting to take you down.
It's like a Game of Thrones.
It is. It's a constant struggle for power. And there are no guarantees.
So even if you manage to stay on top for a while, eventually someone's going to come for you.
Right. It's inevitable. And that's why it's so important to ask yourself, is it worth it?
Is all that power worth the sacrifice?
Right. Is it worth the loneliness, the paranoia, the risk of self-destruction?
Because in the end, you're left with nothing.
Right. You're left with an empty shell of a life.
Yeah.
And that's not a legacy anyone wants to leave behind.
Okay, so let's wrap this up.
Sure.
What are the big takeaways?
I think the biggest takeaway is that power for these people, it's about control.
Right.
Not influence.
Not leadership.
No, just control. Plain and simple. And they achieve that control through manipulation.
And they're really good at it.
They are, because they don't let emotions get in the way.
And they're masters of deception.
Yes, they know how to twist the truth to get what they want.
And once they have power, they'll do whatever it takes to keep it.
Even if it means hurting other people.
Right. And that's the scary part.
It is. It is. But now that you know how it works, you're better equipped to protect yourself.
Right. Because knowledge is power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the more you know about manipulation, the less likely you are to be manipulated.
So listener, if you ever encounter someone who seems a little too charming, a little too smooth,
Yeah.
pay attention to how they make you feel.
Yeah.
If something feels off, trust your gut.
Absolutely.
Because it could be a sign that you're being manipulated.
It very well could be. It's better to be safe than sorry.
It is.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But it's been a really important conversation.
It has.
So thank you to you, listener.
Yes, thank you.
For joining us on this deep dive into psychology of master manipulators.
We hope you learned something.
And that you'll use this knowledge to navigate the world with a little more awareness.
And a lot more caution.
Until next time, stay safe out there.
And stay vigilant.
Because you never know who might be trying to play you.